I was 20 years old when my life truly began, or perhaps when it ended and a new one was forced to start. It's easy to look back at 20 and see only potential, but I didn't feel potential. I felt adrift. I was a junior at a respectable university, majoring in philosophy, which felt more like a default setting than a passion. My friends were busy planning their study abroad trips or their post-graduation careers. I was busy trying to figure out who I was supposed to be. I was a collection of borrowed opinions, half-read books, and a deep, gnawing sense of emptiness I couldn't articulate. The autumn semester had just begun. The air was crisp, carrying the sense of damp leaves and impending change. I was late for my first class of the day, advanced seminar in metaphysics. It sounded dreadfully boring. I slid into a seat in the back row of the tiered lecture hall, just as the professor began to speak. And that's when I saw him for the first time. He wasn't what I expected. The department was full of energetic young adjuncts or dusty old men who mumbled into their notes. He was neither. He was timeless. He stood at the front, not behind the lectern, but leaning against it, as if he owned the very space. This was Professor Miles, Dr. Eris Miles. He was 60 years old, with a full head of silver white hair combed back. He wore a dark tweed jacket with leather elbow patches, the kind you only see in movies. But it was his eyes that held the room captive. They were dark, sharp, and they missed nothing. When he spoke, his voice was a low baritone, a resonant rumble that didn't just fill the room, it settled into it. He wasn't teaching, he was discussing. He spoke of Kant and Hume, not as historical footnotes, but as if they were old friends he just had coffee with. He connected their centuries-old ideas to the anxiety of modern life, to the very feeling of being adrift that I was drowning in. For the first time, I wasn't just taking notes. I was listening. I was captivated. I found myself going to his office hours. At first, it was purely academic. I had a question about my first paper proposal. His office was a sanctuary of old-world academia, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, stacks of papers, the faint smell of pipe tobacco and old paper. "You're struggling with the core premise, Miss Evans," he said, handing my paper back. It was covered in red ink. I felt a flush of embarrassment. Yes, I don't think I'm making any sense, I admitted. He leaned back in his large leather chair. He didn't smile, not exactly. It was more of a softening of his features. Making sense is the final step. The first step is to feel the question. You're trying to answer a question you haven't allowed yourself to feel yet. That was it. That was the moment. We were supposed to talk for 15 minutes. We talked for 2 hours. We talked about my paper, yes, but then we talked about the book I was reading for pleasure. We talked about art, about the city, about the suffocating pressure to have your entire life mapped out at 20. He listened, truly listened. He didn't offer solutions or platitudes. He simply saw me in a way I had never felt seen before. I left his office feeling electrified, my mind buzzing. This became a routine. Once a week, then twice. My paper grade improved dramatically. I became the star student, but it wasn't about the grades anymore. I lived for those conversations. I began to dress more carefully on the days I had his class, choosing sweaters I thought were more mature, whatever that meant. I told myself it was professional respect. I was lying to myself. One rainy Thursday, I was in his office, and the conversation had turned personal. He was talking about his time in Paris in the 1970s. I was hanging on every word. It must have been amazing, I sighed, looking out at the rain-lashed quad. He said, it was complicated. His eyes met mine, and the air in the small, cluttered office suddenly felt thin. The academic, professional distance between us evaporated. In its place was something else. A tension so palpable it felt like a physical weight. I should have left. I should have thanked him for his time and run. But I couldn't move. He just looked at me, his gaze intense, searching. It felt like he was reading every thought, every secret hope I'd barely admitted to myself. And the thought that screamed in my head was a terrifying three-part harmony. He is my professor. He is 40 years older than me. This is wrong. And then a fourth, quieter whisper. I don't care. The boundary, once blurred, is impossible to restore. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, agonizing, beautiful collapse. It was a war of attrition against propriety. It was late-night emails, ostensibly about my thesis, that veered into confessions. I would write, I'm not sure I agree with Sartre's view on existential dread. And it would be code for, I'm lonely. Are you? He would write back, Sartre was limited by his own experiences, as we all are. And it was code for, I'm lonely too. The real shift happened off campus. He had mentioned a small, independent bookstore that carried a rare edition of a text I needed. I happened to be there on a Saturday. He was there too. We both knew it wasn't a coincidence. We had coffee. Away from the Gothic architecture of the university, he seemed different. Still brilliant, but softer. He was just Eris. He asked about my family. I asked about his. He was divorced, amicably, years ago. His children were grown, older than I was. A fact that hung in the air like a ghost. This is probably unwise, Alara, he said, stirring his coffee. He never used my name. It was always Ms. Evans. Hearing Alara from him felt like a caress. What is? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. This. You and me, talking like this. Is it? I challenged, bolder than I'd ever been. It's just coffee. He looked at me, a profound sadness in his eyes. For now. The first move was mine. I couldn't help it. It was desperation. It was adoration. It was a desperate need to be anchored to something, and he was the most solid thing I had ever known. We were walking through the park after that coffee. The air was cold. I wasn't wearing enough. I shivered. He stopped and, without a word, unwrapped his scarf, a dark woolen thing, and draped it around my neck. His fingers brushed my skin. It was electric. I didn't think. I just leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was clumsy and cold and desperate. His lips were chapped from the wind. He froze for a second, a sharp intake of breath. I pulled back, horrified. I'm so sorry, And then he put his hand on the back of my neck and kissed me back, properly. It was slow and deep, and it tasted of coffee and 40 years of a life I knew nothing about. It was the most terrifying and the most wonderful moment of my life. "We can never do that again," he whispered against my hair. We did it again the next day. Thus began our dual life. By day, I was Miss Evans, the bright, detached philosophy student. He was Professor Miles, the respected academic. We were a model of professional decorum. I would ask a question in class, and he would answer it, his eyes sweeping the room, never lingering on me for more than a second. By night, I was Ilara, and he was Eris. The thrill was intoxicating. It was our secret against the world. We met in diners in neighboring towns, in tiny dark cinemas where we wouldn't be recognized. I would go to his house, a quiet place on the edge of town, and we would cook dinner. He taught me how to make a real risotto. I taught him about the music my friends were listening to. It was domestic. It was surprisingly normal. We talked. God, we talked. We talked for hours, for days. I felt my mind expanding. He wasn't just my professor. He wasn't just my lover. He was my best friend. But the anxiety was a constant simmering poison. My phone became a vault. I lied to my roommates, my friends, my parents. I'm at the library. I'm with my study group. The lies piled up, creating a wall between me and the rest of my life. I became a ghost on campus, paranoid and jumpy. Every time a student looked at us in the hallway, I was convinced they knew. Every time another professor smiled at me, I thought it was a warning. The age gap was invisible most of the time when we were alone. He was just Eris, but sometimes it would hit me. He would reference a political event, a song, a movie, and I would have no idea what he was talking about. He spoke of retirement. I was still thinking about midterms. One night, he was looking for his reading glasses. He couldn't find them, and he got frustrated, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He said, "Everything just blurs," his voice heavy with fatigue. It was a small thing, but it was a stark reminder. He was 60. His body was aging. I was 20. My life was just beginning. "Does this bother you?" I asked quietly, finding his glasses on the mantelpiece. "The difference." He took them from me, his hand warm on mine. "Ilara," he said, his voice serious. "What bothers me is not the difference, it's the world's perception of it. It's the fact that I am in a position of power over you. It's that what I feel for you could destroy your reputation and mine." "I don't care about my reputation," I said, a little too quickly. "You should." he replied, and the sadness was back in his eyes. You're 20. You have no idea what a reputation is or what it costs to lose one. He was right, and I was about to find out. It all came crashing down on a Tuesday, a perfectly normal, gray, boring Tuesday. I was in the library when I got the email. It was from the Dean of Faculty. Miss Evans, my office requires your presence at 4 p.m. today. Please be prompt. This is not optional. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. I walked to the administration building in a daze. The world felt silent, muffled. I remember the click of my own heels on the marble floor. The dean's office was large and imposing. The dean was there, and so was the university provost, and a woman I didn't recognize who introduced herself as university legal counsel. There was no small talk. Miss Evans, the dean began, his hand steepled on his massive desk. It has come to our attention that you are engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a member of our faculty, specifically Professor Eris Miles. The room tilted. I couldn't breathe. My carefully constructed world, my secret, beautiful life, just shattered. I I don't know what you're talking about, I stammered. The lie was weak, pathetic, even to my own ears. The lawyer slid a manila folder across the desk. Please don't make this more difficult. She opened it. Inside were photographs. Me, Aris, getting into his car, kissing him outside the bookstore, a grainy shot of me entering his house and not leaving until the next morning. Someone had followed us. Someone had documented our entire secret life. We received these from an anonymous source, the provost said, his voice cold. A concerned member of the university community. I felt sick. Who would do this? That's irrelevant, the dean snapped. What is relevant is that Professor Miles has violated sections 4A and 5C of the Faculty Code of Conduct. A consensual relationship with a student under his direct academic supervision is a fireable offense. Consensual? The lawyer interjected smoothly. That's a matter for discussion. You are 20, Miss Evans. He is 60. He is your professor. The power dynamic here is extremely problematic. They were twisting it. They were painting it as something sordid, something transactional. He didn't do anything, I insisted, my voice rising. I love him. It's not like that. Of course it's not, the lawyer said, her voice dripping with pity, which was worse than the anger. You're very young. It's understandable that a man of his charisma and stature would be influential. They were painting me as a victim, as a naive, stupid child who had been manipulated. It was more insulting than being called a homewrecker. What do you want? I whispered, the fight draining out of me. Your testimony, the lawyer said. A written statement detailing when the relationship began, how it was initiated. It will be confidential, of course. It will help us expedite Professor Miles's termination. They wanted me to betray him, to save my own skin, my reputation, by feeding him to the wolves. I looked at their faces. The dean's stern disapproval, the provost's cold bureaucracy, the lawyer's clinical predatory sympathy. No, I said. The dean looked startled. No? No, I won't. You can't make me. Ms. Evans, the lawyer said, leaning forward. You need to understand the alternative. If you don't cooperate, we will be forced to launch a formal public inquiry. It will be messy. Your name will be involved. Your parents will be notified. You could be expelled. Expelled? The word hung in the air. My entire future. I need to think, I said. I stood up, my legs shaking so badly I had to grip the chair. You have until tomorrow at noon, 4 p.m. Professor Miles is being brought in for his own meeting right now. I ran out of the office. I ran out of the building. I didn't stop running until I was at the old stone bridge over the river that cut through the campus. I was sobbing, great, gasping cries that hurt my chest. He was in a meeting right now. They were doing the same thing to him. My phone rang. It was my mother. My blood ran even colder. Ilara, what is going on? We just got a call from the dean's office. Her voice was high-pitched with panic. They had already called them. The lawyer's offer of confidentiality was a lie. Mom, I started, but I couldn't. They're saying things, Ilara, horrible things, about you and one of your professors? A man my age? Tell me it's not true. Please, Ilara, tell me this is a mistake. I could hear my father shouting in the background. Put her on speaker. Ilara, you get on a train home right now. You're done at that school. Do you hear me? We didn't raise you to be some whore for a grade. I hung up. I was 20 years old. In the span of 1 hour, I had lost my academic future, my family, and my reputation. There was only one person left. I ran to his house. It was raining again. I banged on the door, my fist raw. He opened it. He looked wrecked. He was still in his suit, but his tie was loosened. His silver hair was mussed. He had clearly just come from his own interrogation. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, his eyes full of a pain that mirrored my own. He pulled me inside, out of the rain, and just held me while I fell apart. They gave me an ultimatum, he said finally, his voice hoarse. Resign, effective immediately, or face a public tribunal and be fired. And they threatened to press charges. Abuse of power. They told me I'd be expelled if I didn't testify against you. I whispered into his chest. He held me tighter. This is my fault. I knew the risk. I should have protected you. I am so sorry, Ilara. Don't, I said, pulling back to look at him. Don't you dare. It's our fault. What do we do? He looked around his beautiful, quiet office. His entire life was in that room. Decades of work, of respect, of identity. He wants my resignation by morning, he said. And I have to go home. My parents. They disowned me, Eris. This was it. The choice. He could fight for his career, and I could go home and beg for forgiveness. We could end this right here and try to salvage the pieces of our old lives. We could pretend the last 6 months never happened. Or, I said, my voice shaking but finding a new strength. Or we leave. Both of us. Tonight. Eris looked at me. The brilliant professor, the man who had an answer for everything, and he looked completely and utterly lost. Leave? He said. Go where? Anywhere, I said. I don't care. I have about $300 in my bank account. I'll pack a bag. You have a car. We just go. Let them have their scandal. Let them have the careers and the reputations. We can have each other. It was insane. It was the plot of a bad novel. It was impulsive and childish and had no chance of success. He was silent for a full minute. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantelpiece. Then he walked over to his desk, picked up a pen, and scrawled something on a piece of university letterhead. He folded it and put it in an envelope. That, he said, is my resignation. He turned to me. Go pack your bag. We leave in an hour. We drove for 12 hours. We didn't talk about what we'd left behind. We just drove west. Eris sold his car, the last link to his old life, in a dusty town in Ohio. We used that money to buy 2 bus tickets to Portland, Oregon, a city where the rain would wash away our past, and where, allegedly, people in their 20s and 60s could coexist. We were exiles. The first year was brutal. All the romance of our grand escape evaporated in the face of reality. We rented a tiny, damp basement apartment. Eris, the brilliant academic, couldn't get a job. His resignation was a black mark. He was overqualified for everything, and the academic world is small. News traveled. He was toxic. He ended up taking a job at a used bookstore. The irony was bitter. I tried to enroll in the local community college, but my transcripts from my old university were locked, pending the disciplinary inquiry. I was a college dropout. I got a job as a barista. All we had was each other. And some days that felt like barely enough. The lies we told to hide the relationship were replaced by new lies. We told our landlord we were uncle and niece. It was easier. It stopped the questions. The reality of the age gap, once a thrilling, abstract concept, was now our daily life. I would come home buzzing with the stupid drama of the coffee shop, and he would be quiet, reading. He was 61. He was tired. His knees hurt when it rained. We had our first real fight. I don't even remember what it was about. Money, probably. I was terrified of our dwindling savings. He was resigned to it. Why aren't you fighting? I screamed at him. You're just giving up. This bookstore, this apartment, this isn't a life. This, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, is the life we chose. What did you expect, Alara? A triumphant parade? We are pariahs. I am a 61-year-old man who lost his career because he slept with his student. You are a 21-year-old dropout living with him. These are the facts. Yelling won't change them. I slapped him. The sound echoed in the tiny room. I had never hit anyone in my life. I was horrified. He just stood there, his hand to his cheek, his eyes not angry, but filled with a bottomless pity. I'm I'm sorry, I whispered, collapsing onto the threadbare couch. I'm not me. I don't know who I am anymore. He sat next to me. He didn't touch me. None of us get to be who we were. We only get to be who we are now. And right now, we are two people in a basement apartment in Portland. The question is, do we want to be? It was the out. He was giving it to me. I could leave. I could call my parents, beg for forgiveness, go home, and pretend this was all a phase. I looked at him, the silver-haired man who had lost everything for me, the man who had seen me at my worst, who had listened to my half-formed thoughts and treated them like gospel, the man I had just struck in anger. I want to be with you. That was the turning point. It stopped being an escape. It started being a life. It wasn't easy. It was never easy. I eventually got my transcript situation sorted out and finished my degree at Portland State. I got a job at a small publishing house, reading manuscripts. Eris started a writing group at the bookstore. He began to write, not academic papers, but his own stories, his memoirs. We found a new normal. We built a small community of other weirdos, artists, writers, people who didn't fit in. In Portland, a 40-year age gap wasn't the most interesting thing about us. We learned to live with the judgment, the stares we got holding hands in public, the waiter who would inevitably hand him the check, even when I was paying, the doctors who would ask me, "And you are I'm his wife," I'd say. We got married at a courthouse on a Tuesday, 5 years after we fled. No guests, just us. We learned to deal with the realities of the age. When I was 28 and thinking about my career, he was 68 and thinking about his mortality. We had a health scare, a bad one. He was in the hospital for a week. I sat by his bed, holding his hand, and realized with a terrifying clarity that I was going to lose him. I was going to be a widow before I was 40. The age gap wasn't a number. It was time. It was the thief that was always in the room with us. But there were quiet victories. The first time his memoir was published, the night I got my first big promotion, waking up on a Sunday morning, making coffee, reading the paper together, the silence comfortable, earned. We had built a life, not the one we'd planned, a harder one, a stranger one, but it was ours. It's been 15 years. I am 35. Eris is 75. We live in that same city. We have a small house now, with a garden he tends to. I'm an editor at the publishing house. He's published 3 books. We are happy. It's a quiet, weathered happiness. It's not the fiery, desperate passion of that first year. It's something deeper, something forged. My parents and I speak now. It took a decade. They came to visit. They saw our life. They saw that I wasn't brainwashed. I wasn't a victim. I was just a woman who loved a man. They don't understand. Not really. But they accept. My father and Eris even talk about history, politics. It's civilized. Sometimes a new email will pop up. A new young journalist who has dug up the scandal of Professor Miles and wants an interview. They want the sordid details. They want to know if I regret it. Was it worth it? That's the question, isn't it? The one everyone wants to know. Was it worth his career? Was it worth my family? Was it worth the years of exile and shame? I look at my 20-year-old self, that lost, intense, foolish, brave girl. The girl who walked into a philosophy class and found a new religion. What would I tell her? I would tell her that love is not a feeling, it's a choice. And it's a choice you have to make every single day. I would tell her that the world will try to break anything it doesn't understand. I would tell her that she will lose everything she thinks she values. And I would tell her to do it anyway. Because this secret story of ours, it wasn't a secret. It was a truth. It was the only truth that mattered. He's 40 years older. He was my professor. And he is the love of my entire life.